Warming's impacts much worse since Kyoto. Since the 1997 International Accord to Fight Global Warming, climate change has worsened and accelerated beyond some of the grimmest of warnings made back then. As the world has talked for a dozen years about what to do next, new ship passages opened for the once frozen summer sea ice of the Arctic. In Greenland and Antarctica, ice sheets have lost trillions of tons of ice. Mountain glaciers in Europe, South America, Asia, and Africa are shrinking faster than ever before. And it's not just the frozen parts of the world that have felt the heat in a dozen years leading up to next month's climate summit in Copenhagen. The world's oceans have risen by at least 1.5 inches and are still rising rapidly. Droughts and wildfires have turned more severe worldwide, from the U.S. West to Australia to the Sahel Desert of North Africa. Species now in trouble because of changing climate include not just the polar bear, which has become a symbol of global warming, but also fragile butterflies, exotic colorful frogs, and entire stands of North American pine forests. Temperatures over the past 12 years are 0.4 of a degree warmer than the dozen years leading up to 1997. Even the gloomiest climate models back in the 1990s didn't forecast results quite this bad so fast. The latest science is telling us we are in more trouble than we thought. And here's why. Since an agreement to reduce greenhouse gas pollution was signed in Kyoto, Japan in December 1997, the level of carbon dioxide in the air has increased 6.5%. Officials from across the world will convene in Copenhagen next month to seek a follow-up pact, one that President Barack Obama says has immediate operational effect, an important step forward in the effort to rally the world around a solution. The last effort didn't quite get the anticipated results. From 1997 to 2008, world carbon dioxide emissions from the burning of fossil fuels have increased 31%. U.S. emissions of this greenhouse gas rose 3.7%, and emissions from China, now the biggest producer of this pollution, have more than doubled in that time period. And the effects of greenhouse gases are more powerful and happening sooner than predicted, scientists say. Back in 1997, the impacts of climate change were underestimated. The rate of change has been faster. By far, the most serious differences that we've had is an acceleration of the crisis itself. The problem is in everyone's face. In 1997, global warming was an issue for climate scientists, environmentalists, and policy people. Now, lawyers, biologists, engineers, insurance specialists, economists, risk managers, disaster professionals, commodity traders, nutritionists, and even psychologists are working on global warming. We've come from a time in 1997 where this was some abstract problem working its way around scientific circles or communities, to know when the problem is, or to now when the problem is in everyone's face. The changes in the last 12 years that had the scientists most alarmed are happening in the Arctic with melting summer sea ice, and around the world with the loss of key land-based ice masses. It's all happening far faster than predicted, Back in 1997, nobody in their wildest expectations would have forecast the dramatic, sudden loss of summer sea ice in the Arctic that started about 5 years ago. From 1993 through 1997, sea ice would shrink on average in the summer to approximately 2.7 million square miles. But the average for the last 5 years is less than 2 million square miles. So what's been lost is the size of Alaska. Antarctica had a slight increase in sea ice, mostly because of the cooling effect of the ozone hole, according to the British Antarctic Survey. But at the same time, large chunks or huge chunks of ice shelves, adding up to the size of Delaware, came off the Antarctic Peninsula. While melting Arctic Ocean ice doesn't raise sea levels, the melting of giant land-based ice sheets and glaciers that drain into the seas or oceans do. Those are shrinking dramatically at both poles. Trillions of tons of ice lost. Measurements show that since 2000, Greenland has lost more than 1.5 trillion tons of ice, while Antarctica has lost at least 1 trillion tons since 2002, according to 2 scientific studies published this fall, and multiple reports from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports. Scientists didn't anticipate ice sheet loss in Antarctica, and the rate of those losses is accelerating rapidly, so that Greenland's ice sheets are melting twice as fast now as they were just 7 years ago, increasing sea level rise. So in other words, yes, the worst case scenarios are coming true. Worldwide glaciers are shrinking 3 times faster than in the 1970s, and the average glacier has lost at least 25 feet of ice since 1997, said Michael Zemp, a researcher at World Glacier Monitoring Service at the University of Zurich. Glaciers are a good climate indicator. What we see is an accelerated loss of ice. Also, permafrost, the frozen northern ground that oil pipelines are built upon, and which traps the potent greenhouse gas methane, which is 20 to 25 times more potent than CO2, is thawing at an alarming rate. Another new post-1997 impact of global warming has scientists very concerned. The oceans are getting more acidic because more of the carbon dioxide in the air is being absorbed into the water, and that could kill off most of the sea life or the marine life in the oceans. More acidic water harms coral, oysters, and plankton, and yes, ultimately threatens the ocean food chain, biologists say. In 1997, there was no interest in plants and animals and how they were hampered by climate change, said Stanford University biologist Terry Root. Now, scientists are talking about which species can be saved from extinction and which are goners. The polar bear became the first species put on the federal list of threatened species. Millions of acres damaged. More than 37 million acres of Canadian and U.S. pine forests have been damaged by beetles that don't die in warmer winters. And in the U.S. West, the average number of acres burned per fire has more than doubled. Insurance losses and blackouts have soared. Experts say global warming is partly to blame. The number of major U.S. weather-related blackouts from 2004 to 2008 were more than 7 times higher then from 1993 to 1997. The message on the science is that we know a lot more than we did in 1997, and it's all negative. Things are much worse than the models predicted. And again, these are more signs of the end times. Transition days. Real change must happen. It must happen for the better, quickly. And there are many signs.